August 18th, 1976. The Korean Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ. On what should have been a routine day, a small group of American and South Korean soldiers headed into the Joint Security Area. Their mission was simple: trim a large poplar tree that was obstructing the view between two UN command observation posts. It was a task they had performed before without incident. But on this day, everything would change. What started as a simple gardening chore would spiral into a brutal international incident, pushing the Korean peninsula to the brink of a second devastating war. This is the story of the axe murder incident and the massive show of force that followed, Operation Paul Bunyan. The DMZ is often called the most dangerous place on Earth. It's a 2.5-mile wide, 155-mile long strip of land that has separated North and South Korea since the end of the Korean War in 1953. For decades, it's been a site of tense standoffs and occasional, violent clashes. The Joint Security Area, or JSA, is the one spot where North and South Korean forces stand face to face. It's a place governed by a fragile truce and a complex set of rules. On that fateful August morning, Captain Arthur Bonifas of the U.S. Army led a team of 5 South Korean service corpsmen to prune the poplar tree. He was accompanied by his platoon leader, First Lieutenant Mark Barrett, and 11 other American and South Korean guards. They carried no firearms, as per the JSA regulations at the time. Their only tools were axes and saws. Initially, the North Korean soldiers seemed uninterested. They watched from a distance as the work began. But then, a senior North Korean officer, Lieutenant Pak Chol, arrived with about 15 of his men. Pak Chol shouted at the Americans to stop, claiming the tree had been planted by Kim Il-sung himself and could not be touched. Captain Bonifas, a decorated Vietnam veteran, assured Pak Chol they were only trimming the branches and turned his back to supervise his men. It was a fatal mistake. Witnesses reported that Pak Chol suddenly yelled, "Kill the bastards!" The North Korean soldiers, armed with clubs and the Americans' own axes, swarmed the UN detail. In the ensuing chaos, Captain Bonifas was bludgeoned to death. Lieutenant Barrett managed to escape the initial onslaught, leaping over a low wall and into a shallow ravine. But the North Koreans pursued him, cornering him and hacking him to death with an axe. The attack was swift, brutal, and utterly shocking. The remaining American and South Korean soldiers, unarmed and outnumbered, fought back with their bare hands, but were eventually forced to retreat, carrying their wounded. The entire horrific event lasted less than 5 minutes. News of the unprovoked attack sent shockwaves through the U.S. military and the White House. 2 American officers had been murdered in cold blood over a tree. President Gerald Ford was furious. This was a direct challenge to American military presence and credibility on the peninsula. The top brass in Washington and Seoul agreed. A strong response was necessary. But what kind of response? Some advisors pushed for immediate, massive airstrikes on North Korean military targets. The situation was incredibly volatile. A single misstep could plunge the region back into full-scale war, a conflict that could potentially involve China and the Soviet Union. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The U.S. needed to demonstrate unwavering resolve without starting World War III. After 3 days of intense debate, a plan was approved. It was codenamed Operation Paul Bunyan. The objective was simple and symbolic. They were going back to finish the job. They were going to cut down that tree. But this time, it wouldn't be a small, unarmed detail. Operation Paul Bunyan was designed to be one of the most intimidating shows of military force in modern history. At dawn on August 21st, just 3 days after the murders, the operation began. A convoy of 23 American and South Korean vehicles rolled into the JSA. Inside were 16 U.S. Army engineers armed with chainsaws. They were escorted by a 30-man Special Forces team, armed with rifles and grenade launchers, who took up defensive positions around the tree. And that was just the ground force. The sky told the real story. Circling directly overhead were 27 helicopters, including Cobra attack helicopters. Further back, F-4 Phantom II fighter jets from the U.S. Air Force and South Korean F-5s were on full alert, ready to strike. In the skies over the Yellow Sea, B-52 strategic bombers from Guam, escorted by F-111 fighter bombers, made their presence known, flying just south of the DMZ. An entire aircraft carrier task force, the USS Midway, was stationed just offshore. Every U.S. soldier in South Korea was on maximum alert at DEFCON 3. It was a massive, overwhelming display of power, all focused on a single poplar tree. The North Koreans were caught completely by surprise. As the chainsaws roared to life and began cutting into the tree, their soldiers scrambled to their posts. They set up machine guns, but they didn't fire. They could see they were utterly outmatched. They watched, impotently, as the American engineers systematically cut the tree down, leaving only a 6-foot stump as a permanent reminder. The entire operation took just 42 minutes. The UN command forces withdrew without a single shot being fired. The message was crystal clear: do not mistake restraint for weakness. The United States had demonstrated that it would not tolerate attacks on its personnel and would respond with overwhelming force if provoked again. In the aftermath, North Korea, surprisingly, blinked. Through an intermediary, Kim Il-sung conveyed a message of regret over the incident, stopping just short of a full apology, but acknowledging that the event was regrettable and that such incidents should be avoided in the future. It was a rare concession from the famously defiant regime. The crisis de-escalated. The 1976 axe murder incident remains a grim chapter in the history of the Korean DMZ. It serves as a stark reminder of how quickly tensions can boil over in this heavily fortified borderland. Captain Arthur Bonifas and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett paid the ultimate price. In their honor, the UN command post in the JSA was renamed Camp Bonifas, and the stump of that infamous poplar tree stood for years as a silent monument to the day a simple gardening task almost reignited a war. Operation Paul Bunyan showed the world the immense power the U.S. could bring to bear, but it also highlighted the razor's edge upon which peace in the Korean peninsula has always rested. Thank you for watching. If you found this piece of history interesting, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into historical events. See you next time.